All right, everyone, be honest. Raise your hand if you thought the Austrian Grand Prix was going to be the best race of the season. Now, I don't know about best race of the season, but I do love the Austrian Grand Prix. We're here to talk about everything that went on this weekend, this Sunday in the Grand Prix held in Austria around the Red Bull Ring. It got spicy, and we are better off for it. What's going on, guys? Welcome back, and we are here to talk about an absolute banger of a race that was the Austrian Grand Prix. It was very touch and go there for a little bit in the beginning, but definitely into the middle portion of the race. But thanks to a slow stop by Red Bull and a wild finish, I think it turned it around to being the best race of the year, and we are here to talk about it. But before we get started, if you haven't already, subscribe down below. We love talking about F1 here and doing some sim racing on the side as well. We'd love to have you, and leave a comment down below. But you would rate the Austrian Grand Prix out of 10 down in the comment section below, and what your favorite moment was of the race. I have a feeling a lot of people are going to have a pretty similar favorite moment of the race. And if you do enjoy the video, go ahead and give me a thumbs up on the video as well. It really helps me out. But we're going to kick things off with our quick hits. We're going to talk about our weekend winners and losers, and then we'll go over the predictions that we made at the beginning of the weekend to see how we got on. So let's go ahead and get this thing started with our quick hits. Guys, what an absolute beautiful Grand Prix we had this weekend. The sprint race, I think, was pretty exciting in terms of sprint race standards, but the Grand Prix was the perfect way to cap off this second round of this triple header we're currently under. And boy, oh boy, was it incredible and delivered in every single way imaginable. Obviously, we have to start with the biggest talking point of the weekend is our Haas Master class. The Haaster class is in effect. That's right. Haas come double points finish this weekend in Austria. Nico Hülkenberg P8, Nico Hülkenberg P6 rather. Kevin Magnussen P8, a double points finish. We pulled in more points this week than we had the entire season. Up to this point, we are cooking. But nonetheless, Haas did do a very good job, and I think it's going to go unnoticed because of what actually the biggest, thing that happened this weekend. Obviously, is George Russell winning the Austrian Grand Prix. Who would have seen that coming at the beginning of the weekend? Obviously, Mercedes has taken a step up over the last few race weekends, but now they head to Austria, where they're probably not favored to do too well. George ends up qualifying in P3 and actually comes home to win the race. His first win since Brazil 2022. And Mercedes' first win since Brazil 2022. An absolutely wonderfully run race by George. I think he got the maximum out of that Mercedes. But nonetheless, it wasn't just him who we have to talk about in this discussion, because obviously, all right, let's stop beating around the bush, okay? Lando Norris versus Max Verstappen, the true moment of the weekend, without a shadow of a doubt. George winning is massive. Haas delivering is massive. Charles Leclerc having his own whatever is going on back there. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And obviously, we have to talk about Lando versus Max. It is the first true moment, probably since 2021, that we've seen a moment like this. Lando battling for Max for a few laps, more than a few laps even there after the final pit stop rounds. A slow stop by Max Verstappen in his final pit stop. I believe it was 6.5 seconds, which I believe is his first pit stop this season over 3 seconds. And so that obviously slow stop followed up by a very good stop by McLaren for Lando. And obviously there was a tire difference as well. Lando had a new set of tires while Max was on a scrub set of tires. And all of a sudden we found Lando Norris right up the gearbox of Max Verstappen with a handful of laps, 20-ish laps or something like that, maybe a little more. We had a fight for the win on our hands, and boy did it deliver. Multiple attempts by Lando to get through, multiple questionable defenses by Max Verstappen, and it all culminates in turn 3, the prime collision position on the Red Bull Ring's, 7 corners, 10 corners, however many you want to say. And we see Max break at about the 100-meter board. Lando slide one up the outside. Max squeeze Lando all the way to the edge. They end up making contact. Both of them end up with a puncture. Lando ends up DNFing from the race, and Max, because he was so far ahead, managed to continue and still finish in P5, but absolutely taking them both completely out of the race. This is, I think, the first time we've seen a move like this from Max in a couple of years, probably since 2021, like I mentioned, and it was a moment that I think lit the F1 world on fire, because in a race that definitely had intrigue, it was this moment where everyone perked up. Even I jumped out of my seat on my couch to go, oh my goodness, oh my God, George Russell is going to win the race. And boy, oh boy, did it come true. I think everyone sat up in that moment and went, oh my goodness, what did we just watch? And absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, was the moment of the weekend. Maybe the moment of the season so far? Maybe? I think actually, yeah, no, definitely the moment of the season so far. It's definitely going to potentially spice up the rest of this season as Lando tries to mount a charge towards Max. A long shot to say the least, but at the same time, absolute banger of a moment in the season and in recent F1, as Max has basically gone unchallenged over the last few years, and the first time that we see him truly have to battle someone on track for multiple laps in a row with multiple attempts to overtake. We see multiple instances of him allegedly moving under braking, although it did look very much like he was moving under braking, and some very audacious moves by Lando to try and get by, which ultimately ended up with him getting a penalty for track limits. I believe the only driver on the grid to be penalized for track limits. And then obviously it all comes together with the touch, the damage, Lando's retirement, and obviously George Russell coming home to win the race. So I don't even know how to really describe it. Obviously, we're going to see a lot talked about this over the coming week, but it's going to be a quick turnaround. Silverstone is next week, and if they don't make up by the time Silverstone rolls around, I think that could be a very, very fun race weekend to watch. So we'll have to keep an eye out there. Let me know down in the comment section below who you thought was at fault and what you thought of that move and the defense by Max, because it definitely is riding a line, to say the least. I think kind of we'll piggyback off of that one to kind of talk briefly about, has Max actually changed? I know there's a lot of conversation going on online after the race ended there was a lot of talk over the last couple of years about how Max has matured as a driver and all this, that, and the other thing. But is it really the case, or has he just had a car that was fast enough where he knew that no matter what, he would end up back in front anyway? And now that we see a McLaren that potentially is very near, or maybe even in certain situations faster than the Red Bull, now we see him kind of reverting back to the last time he was actually having to battle someone on track in Lewis Hamilton in 2021. There's a lot of conversations going on around that, and I think it's going to be a conversation that potentially could continue over the course of the season if Lando and McLaren are able to continue to close that gap and continue to fight at the front for race wins. So going to be something to keep an eye on. Just wanted to mention it here because I think it is a conversation worth at least thinking about. Got to talk about Piastri. Obviously, I think another one of the, obviously besides George, probably the biggest winner of this one. His qualifying time deleted on his final run in Q3, knocks him out from P3 down to P7. Obviously, with the incident between Lando and Max, finds himself P2 in this one. He moved forward very, very nicely and ends up on the second step of the podium. I believe his fourth podium in F1 overall. Absolutely fantastic job from him. Definitely kind of similar to George, put himself in position to be in position to take advantage of an incident like Max and Lando coming together. Absolutely wonderful job from Piastri. Super fun to watch. Absolutely. Next, we got to talk about Alpine drama, because boy, oh boy, is it super fun when the Alpines are next to each other on track, because I think we're really starting to see that those two drivers do not like each other at all. They don't like each other so much that after Gasly made his way around Ocon, he hit him with the chow and over the radio, and they showed it on the broadcast, and then he obviously was able to finish in the points. So I think that drama is only going to continue to ramp up. They have definitely taken a step forward, and anytime we see them on track next to each other, we're all just kind of wincing, waiting for something to happen between them, and I do think it is coming, but they managed to survive it this time. And then we'll finish out with two things. We got to talk about Charles Leclerc and how I believe that his Monaco curse has shifted from being the Monaco curse to being the Monaco curse, where he wins Monaco and the curse is now distributed from inside a box. It inverted the axis and the limits, and now it's every other track on the calendar. Because since he won in Monaco, the man has not had a good weekend since. And this one was no different. He got pinched into turn one by Sergio Perez and Oscar Piastri, damaging his front wing and having to pit at the end of lap one, effectively putting him at the back for the majority of the race. At one point, Ferrari mentioned that they projected him to still finish in the points. Obviously, that didn't end up happening. but he did make up more than a few positions, but no points for Charles. And so definitely that man needs a good weekend like nobody else at this point. And it's honestly impressive at how he's managed to do quite this level of, just unluckiness. I don't even think he's performing poorly. He did have that moment in qualifying where he kind of skipped over the gravel into the grass, but the Ferrari also just looks a little bit unseated at the moment. But at the same time, Carlos Sainz on the podium as well. So I don't know. Is he really that unlucky? He also did have issues in qualifying, which obviously didn't help because he ended up not being able to set a time in Q3. So I don't know. And then I'm going to round things out. Once again, bringing it out. Haas sandwich. We got to talk about Nico Hülkenberg holding off Sergio Perez for the final, I don't even know how many laps, including being overtaken on the final lap and then getting back in front right at the death in the last lap and coming home to finish in front of a Red Bull. Absolutely juiced stuff from Nico. Absolutely wonderful stuff from him this weekend and Haas in general. We got to talk about Haas a little bit because they ran probably one of their best weekends of the year, probably one of their best weekends in a year and a half. Wonderfully done. Pit stops were good enough, and the strategy actually ended up working out very, very well. It was a very controversial thing. They were the only one to really commit to the early 3-stop. They stopped much earlier than everyone else, and it ultimately ended up working out for them. Kevin Magnussen moving up from 12th to 8th, and then Nico obviously moving up from 9th to 6th. So massive results from Haas. Let's go. That's my team. But that wraps up my quick hits. Let me know what I missed down in the comment section below. All right, let's move things along to our weekend winners and losers. We'll kick things off with our weekend winner. And this is not my official pick, and I do actually have an honorable mention as well. And so we'll kick it off with my honorable mention, and then I think I'm going to give a general honorable mention after my actual winner. But my honorable mention goes to my boy, Nico Hülkenberg. Absolute masterclass from the German friend here. Coming home, Haas's best finish in a while, and 100% a fantastic race from him. Really slow start to the weekend for him, but he came home and delivered when it mattered the most. Claps for Nico Hülkenberg. But nonetheless, let us talk about our actual weekend winner, and I think it has to be George Russell, right? Has to be? It definitely has to be, right? I mean, the guy qualifies P3, pretty good, very continuing Mercedes step forward so far this season, and then putting himself in position. He obviously was battling with Lewis in the beginning of the race, ended up holding position, and then did enough to kind of pull away, create that gap from a charging Piastri behind when it mattered the most, when all of a sudden he found himself leading. And even a VSC couldn't close the gap, and he ended up coming home to win the Austrian Grand Prix. His second win in Formula One, his first one since 2022. Huge congratulations to him and Mercedes for that matter. They have definitely, started charging back up towards the through the field, and they give us our 5th different winner of the year and our 4th constructor to win a race this year. So absolutely huge win for Mercedes. I mean, they say you got to put yourself in position to be in position. And George found himself in position to be in position today. And he definitely comes home to take he literally and figuratively comes home to take the win on this one with the classic Max Verstappen coming together that we saw with Lando. I'm going to keep talking about it because it truly was just a moment I'm never going to forget from this season, because it really was just a crazy moment. Both, you could feel the energy shift in the F1 universe. But George comes home to win. Obviously, huge congratulations. Now let's move on to my actual honorable mentions, and my biggest winner honorable mention is definitely us, the fans. And I mean, boy, we were treated to a crazy finish to the Grand Prix. We saw a multi-lap battle-long thing with Max and Lando. We saw a lot of on-track action with the Alpines. We saw the Haas cars getting a little bit spicy with each other before ultimately kind of settling in. We saw a crazy finish with Nico and Checo at the end of the race, almost battling to the line. We saw Charles Leclerc doing Charles Leclerc things, and it was a wonderful race. On-track battles, up and down the grid. Crazy, wildest finishes that I think I've seen in a Grand Prix weekend since I started watching. Absolutely great stuff. So we, the fans, definitely have to be mentioned here, because we are definitely winners in this weekend as well. All right, and now for my weekend loser. I've gone for a team this time, and I think this one actually is fairly valid. I went for Red Bull as my biggest loser of the weekend. I really debated on this being just Max Verstappen, but I do think we're going to go with Red Bull overall, because even though we did see a return of 2021 Max Verstappen, making those gray area moves, moving under braking, those kind of odd defenses, those very aggressive defensive moves against Lando today. We ultimately can't put the entire weekend just on that moment, even though a lot of people will, because a lot of people have correctly talked about where was Sergio Perez? Obviously, after the race, we learned that he had damage when he was battling with Piastri, I think it was that I saw. And so he obviously wasn't having the pace, and he ended up battling the Haas's for the majority of the second half of the race. But that's why I've gone for Red Bull's my biggest loser here, because because Max had that collision with Lando, limped it back to the pits on 3 tires, had another pit stop, and still managed to finish in the race in P5, while Sergio Perez ended up P7. That is something that Red Bull has to think about at this point. And I know he had damage, and I know this, that, and the other thing, but Red Bull is definitely one of those things. Checo was nowhere to be found at the beginning of this race, and you have to believe that if it was any other top team, the other driver would be there to pick up the pieces. And unfortunately, we did see that a little bit with Piastri coming home to finish in P2, George finishing in P1, even Lewis finished just off the podium in P4. And so you really just have to question, are they regretting that decision to renew Sergio Perez? I don't know. I'm sure there are some people in the back of their head going, I don't know. But when you have one driver who's battling for the lead and ends up crashing out, but still finishes ahead of your second driver, who is battling Nico Hülkenberg in a Haas for P6, and a battle he lost, by the way. I can't give it to anybody else. There were definitely some teams that really, really struggled. Aston Martin is another big one that struggled a lot in this one. But Red Bull, I think in terms of the grand scheme of things, this showed why they currently are in a very precarious position on the F1 grid. All right, let's round things out here with our predictions, results. A very good weekend for your boy here in our terms of our predictions. We kick things off with my biggest positive surprise, and once again, I went for Nico Hülkenberg. I thought after 5 P11 finishes in the first 10 rounds this year, I think Austria was going to be a prime time example of an opportunity for him to get back into the points, and boy, oh boy, did it happen. Coming home P6, that is absolutely a point for me. I will be taking that one and adding it to the tally so far. Moving on to my pick for biggest disappointment, I went for Daniel Ricciardo. VCARB looked very not good last week, and so I thought that might be kind of indicative of what we would see this weekend. Obviously, that did not end up happening. Daniel ends up finishing in the points, with Yuki very much struggling in this one, and so obviously can't give myself a point for that one. Moving on to my qualifying top 3, and thank you to the FIA's interpretation of Oscar Piastri's track limit situation in qualifying. I actually end up going 3 for 3 in qualifying with my pick for Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, George Russell in that order. So that's a big result for me. 3 points there and making us up to 4. This is a sprint weekend, so we made a prediction for sprint winner. I went for Max Verstappen. That one seemed pretty easy, although that one also did look pretty spicy there for a moment, but in the grand scheme of things, it was a fairly comfortable win for Max. In terms of race podium, this one, throw it out the window. Absolutely 0 out of 3 on this one. I had a Lando, Max, Lewis podium. Obviously, we do not get that. We get a George, Piastri, Sainz podium, so 0 points for me there. I don't think a lot of people's podium predictions were going to come true after what we saw with Max and Lando. And then we round things out with my one crazy prediction where I predicted that would be at least 2 safety cars. There was one virtual safety car, and so if there was an actual safety car, I would definitely be fighting for this point. But nonetheless, only the virtual safety car, so no points for me there. That brings my point total for this weekend to 5 points. A fantastic weekend for me after a very slow one last week. So I actually regained the lead in our little community team championship point standings. As we take a look at our final standings here for the weekend, I currently now lead once again with 42.5 points on the season. British TTG just behind with 41, Settle 40 with 39.5, and then F1 Inferno with 24.5, and Andrew with 18.5. And the latter two obviously joined us a few rounds into the season, and so they are definitely playing catch up. But we retake the lead in terms of our community standings, and that is a big weekend for us. We cleared the most points this weekend by a little bit, and we will take that every single day of the week. But that only leaves one question here, guys. What is next in Formula One? That's right, we are in the tail end of a triple header. Next week, F1 heads to the UK to race around Silverstone. Next week, last year, we saw a Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, Lewis Hamilton podium. Who are we going to see on the podium this year? Because I think this race we just watched really goes to show that you never know until the checkered flag waves. But let me know what you think down in the comment section below. But But guys, that is going to wrap up our recap of the 2024 Austrian Grand Prix weekend and the Grand Prix. What a finish. I am still buzzing from this one. I think we're going to be buzzing for the rest of the day, potentially even leading all the way up until Thursday media day in Silverstone. So let me know what you thought down in the comment section below. Once again, subscribe if you haven't already. We'd love to have you join our little community here, and leave a like if you enjoyed the video and you made it this far. But guys, that is going to wrap it up for me here today. We'll see you in a few days for predictions for Silverstone. It is coming up sooner than you could imagine. But until then, guys, I'll see you in the next one.